So, welcome everybody. I'm Charlotte Harrison and I'm the Employability and Enterprise Coordinator for BAL, and I'll let Aaron introduce himself because otherwise it's just a bit weird.
Thank you, Charlotte. I am Aaron Truss and I am the Blended and Online Development Lead for our faculty, which largely means that my job is to do all the things that we're trying to do right now. So that's good fun. I'll hand back over to Charlotte.
So we're going to have the chat running, as I think has been common in all of these sessions. So we would really encourage you to post questions in the chat as we go through, but also any observations, any examples of practice that you're engaged in or that you know about, just any observations that occur to you. We will be monitoring it as we go through, and we will make sure there's time to pick those points up as well. So what are we going to do? We're going to discuss a project that we've been working on for the last 12 months with support from our Faculty Curriculum Innovation Fund. The project started, and it has been quite an evolution, but it started as the design and development of a new online platform to support career management learning for our Level 4 students. But it's since been extended to also include a version for our Level 7 students. I'm just going to get rid of that because otherwise you can't see my slides. Who are also searching for placements. And we've then built an embedded career management learning module around the online platform, and more on that evolution as we go through. So we recognise absolutely, because we're in the same boat, that nobody has the luxury of time or any resource right now to get to grips with converting our modules into blended for the autumn. But what we think is that some aspects of our experience and some of our learning points actually might be helpful and might translate into some of our more immediate priorities for the autumn. So we're thinking that perhaps some of this might be used to deliver, for example, pockets of induction content, or to deliver some learning around specific key skills, or perhaps there's some pre-entry content that students could usefully have access to before the course starts. And we have a slide at the end that will cover that. So when you see that slide, you'll know that we're nearly at the end and you can reach for another coffee. Okay. We're also going to offer an insight into Articulate Rise, which was the platform that we have used for this particular module, so that you can just have a look at how that kind of looks and feels to the students. But what we would say is, and Aaron will cover this in more detail later, actually what we've realised is the choice of platform, the choice of the technology is much less important, although it preoccupies your time quite often, than actually what you're going to do with your content and how you're going to structure your content for your particular topic, and also to maximise those face-to-face touch points that you're going to have with the students. So definitely put your energies in there, I think is what we've learned. And we've been living and breathing this for 12 months, and we're both really passionate about it, both from a career management learning perspective and also a blended learning perspective. So if we get a bit carried away, forgive us. We've tried to present it to you as a case study so that you can pick and choose any bits that you want to take away. So our module is a non-credit bearing blended module called Planning Your Professional Journey. And again, it supports career management learning, and it really aims to increase confidence and readiness for the placement and graduate recruitment process. And as I said, variations of this in its final form will run across the Level 7 and the Level 4 curriculum. So essentially, our students will be working through independent online learning via packages that we've created in Articulate Rise, and they're embedded in Moodle. So what I mean by that is our students will go into Moodle and they'll have a Moodle site for this module, just like all their others, but that will be structured according to the scheme that we've developed for the online platform. And if they're learning this particular area, they will be taken off into a package housed in Articulate Rise, and it's in there that they'll work through the various activities that we've set for them. And then that will be supplemented, their sort of independent online learning, which will be very much guided, that will be supplemented with some face-to-face, and that might either be workshops or some one-to-one tutorials, and that depends on whether they're a Level 4 or a Level 7 student, and it also depends on which course they're studying, because there are subtle variations both in terms of the emphasis within the platform that we've placed for the different parts of the module, whether they're Level 4 or Level 7, and also the workshops are created slightly differently as well. Hopefully that will make more sense as we go through. This was co-created. We've got Jackie and Janet here with us today. Thank you very much, guys. They were some of our really important collaborators on this project. Also our faculty placement team, our alumni, and current and past placement students as well created some of the content with us. So we're going to show you now a really short show reel for the module, which explains the aims and the structure of the module. And we thought if we show it to you now, and before we talk about the design and development, then hopefully you'll get a clearer sense of what we set out to do. So hopefully this will work.
Brilliant, thanks Charlotte. So yeah, we're going to try and show the video through WebEx. So we'll see if this works. It's a little bit like internet sort of in the 1990s, a bit jittery to start with, then hopefully it'll be fine. So Charlotte, can you see the black screen?
I can.
Brilliant.
Planning your professional journey is an employability and placement readiness module designed to help you shape your professional identity and career plans, using online activities, tutorials and workshops to enhance self-awareness, evaluate career options and develop your personal brand me. The module is divided into 3 core sections: discovering, where you develop sharper self-awareness as you focus on your key strengths, skills and values; exploring, where you begin to develop your and embarking, where you learn how to put yourself in the best possible position to navigate the placement and graduate recruitment market. The module involves online activities, workshops and tutorials. Using an easy to navigate and accessible platform with curated content produced by alumni, students, employers and a range of university professionals. Planning your professional journey will get you ready for the placement and graduate recruitment process.
Right, I think I have to share the slides again, so just bear with me. Okay, so hopefully that made some sense, but just in case any bits kind of faded in and out, we've also got this little infographic that summarises the shape of the module for you. So from a career management learning design perspective, we really wanted to ensure that students were going to understand the importance of all of that groundwork that they have to do in discovering and exploring before they get down to embarking, because so often they jump straight to embarking. How do I learn how to play the rules of the recruitment game? How do I learn how to make really good applications? And what they've forgotten about or not been directed to is the importance of this discovering, you know, who am I? What are my skills? What are my values? How might I align that with the kind of roles that I'm looking for? Where are my skills gaps? And how might I address those? And then into exploring, thinking about the opportunities that they can engage in, and also thinking about the kind of job opportunities that are available to them. So this is the shape, if you like, of both the module and also the online platform. And when I was saying about the different emphasis, for our postgrad, they're applying for placements immediately they start on the course. So we are emphasising embarking much more heavily for them, whereas for our level 4s, we're emphasising discovering that much more. So those are the subtle differences. Okay. Just to give you a sense of the kind of journey that we went through to create this product, we have created a timeline. And if you follow the link in the chat that Aaron has just put in there, we've created a timeline using Articulate Rise so that you can just get a sense of the kind of look and feel of the PYPJ packages. I should just say, though, that they are much more text heavy in the timeline than we would have in our planning your professional journey packages, where obviously there's a much greater variety of activities, so more video and podcast and more interaction. But it does give you a feel of how the platform kind of looks. It was a long project. I'm not going to talk about all of the different sections, but what I would just give you a quick summary, I suppose, of how we got here. The project arose from a discussion with our E&E working group, where course leaders, personal tutors, careers and employability colleagues, placement colleagues were all bringing the same kind of challenges around lack of preparedness, really, at level 5 for that graduate recruitment process, and lack of confidence at level 6 around the graduate recruitment process. So we all sort of were coming with the same issues, and it came at a time when we had a real move in the faculty towards embracing more online and blended technology. And you can see that there is a video in there which showcases the research project or research skills project that Aaron was involved in. I think Jan is here as well today, and she was involved in that one. And that was a sort of blended approach to develop a common approach to research methods teaching across the faculty, so we were able to draw on some of that experience. So we put in a bid for a SIF fund, put a small team together and applied for this online platform. But what we realised quite quickly was that actually we needed perhaps to think about that in a much broader sense and to think about embedding it in a blended learning module rather than just having a standalone online platform that perhaps might be more or less engaging for students, and without some direction would we be sure that they were actually going to engage with it. And Aaron's going to talk about the scoping exercise that led to that discussion in due course. You'll also see that we created a little prototype because a lot of the course leaders had brought concerns around level 6 readiness. We didn't want them to miss out, so we spent last summer creating a small prototype so that we could test our kind of storyboard technique, have a look at the capabilities and limitations of Articulate Rise, send that out for feedback before we started on the main project last September. And Aaron is going to talk to you a little bit more about our methodology.
Brilliant, thanks, Charlotte. Yeah, so I'm going to talk briefly about, as Charlotte said, the sort of the underpinning methodology behind what we did. And we don't want this to be too dry because I appreciate it's, as Charlotte said, we can easily spend a long time talking about this. We're very excited about it. We want to give a bit of an insight into how we settled on the approach of what we did. So from the timeline there that we've shared, you can see over the past year, we went through various elements of the scoping phase. And one part of that was trying to work out what other institutions did to deliver their employability and placement readiness skills. And what we did was we looked at some other UK and European institutions, and we found that some of them delivered employability and placement readiness skills purely online, while other ones used a combination of online and face-to-face delivery. And fundamentally a challenge for us, as I'm sure it has been for some of you guys if you're delivering things in your own faculties, is that what can be seen as a skills-based kind of agenda can sometimes be taken as a bolt-on to core curriculum. And we really wanted to avoid that sense of this being something that just got sort of stuck onto the side of a course, and as a consequence, engagement was a real challenge. So for us, what we wanted to do was we try and make sure engagement was appropriate. So we decided to position PYPGA, the project, as a pass-fail, non-credit bearing, core timetabled module. I always have to write that down because I can never remember the wording, sorry. So what we really wanted to do was to try and make sure there was a sense of identity with the students' core courses of study, but at the same time we wanted to use the online self-study pathways for sort of the learning by acquisition, if you will, to make sure that we avoided overburdening the teaching teams where possible. So for us, a blended approach was practically viable, but it was also pedagogically viable. The idea was that the face-to-face interactions that we were going to have in classrooms would provide sort of the social constructive elements of opportunities for learning, where people could learn from each other and sort of construct their understanding of the subject. And then the online features that were going to be provided through Moodle and Articulate Rise could largely comprise more of the learning by acquisition, so things like videos and readings, probably doing some production. So we're thinking of producing artifacts and an e-portfolio that was going to be part of the project. And there would also be some opportunities for practice, so scenarios or reflective tasks, that kind of thing. So I think really the summary of that is, in that sense, the module's online elements were always designed to be secondary or supplementary to the face-to-face elements, because we saw the real value as being face-to-face in that regard. So when we came to designing the module, in the timeline previously, there were some brainstorming sessions, and what we wanted to do was to try and follow a really clear process so we could keep the project on track. Because as you may have found in your own faculties, projects such as this, the employability, study skills, or skills around them, there are a lot of stakeholders involved, and the scope means that the project can quickly get out of hand. We consulted with course leaders and students, a student focus group, placements assistants, our careers advisors and placements team. So there are lots and lots of stakeholders involved. And I think a challenge with that as well is that as you bring lots of ideas together, you want to make sure there's consistency and that everyone's needs are taken into account. So our approach was was based on something called the Carpe Diem methodology, which has been around for quite a few years, and it was put forward by a lady called Gilly Salmon a long time ago. It's basically a principle of designing blended or online courses, but it's quite a straightforward way of doing it, and it doesn't involve a great deal of technical expertise, which is really useful for all of us, because we're not sort of experienced learning designers in online course development at this stage. Really, it's all quite new to all of us, I think. And what we did was we used this as an aid to work out some of the practical aspects of the module, which are on the slide. You can see the idea of what we wanted it to look and feel like, what the priorities were going to be. So our priorities were authenticity and professionalism, it's about the individual involved in the course, so it's about the student getting what they need out of it. Primarily, the kind of learning activities are going to be reflective and experiential. And we wanted to emulate that sense of sort of professionalism, as I said. So we were looking for high quality video and good quality artifacts and making it look really nice. And we really wanted to avoid that risk of students disengaging from the material. A little bit like this session now. If you guys are bored with what I'm saying, you can hop off, and that's fine. And that's also the risk with this program, because it's not credit bearing. So it's pass fail, but ultimately there's not that credit bearing element. So we have to make sure that the materials are as engaging as possible to keep students on board with it. And with that in mind, that also determined our choice of the kind of platform we went for. Students going off in different directions all the time. And then in terms of assessment, Charlotte will talk a little bit more about this in due course, but basically we focused on producing a portfolio of content, and the idea is that it all has a purpose, so it all fits into their preparedness for the recruitment process. So we don't want them to do a 2,000-word essay if actually they're not going to have to do that in their placement or graduate recruitment process. So we have to make sure it's really, really relevant. And the idea for us was we wanted to only teach things that were going to be assessed, and only assess things that were going to be taught along this pathway. And Charlotte's often used the metaphor of this idea of panning for gold. So as the students go through the package, they'll be finding elements that they can use along the way, because obviously each of them will be looking in a different sector or a different area, so they'll be finding things that are relevant to them. And I think that's quite a good metaphor, and it's worked quite well as we've developed this project. Okay, thanks, Charlotte. Would you mind popping on to the next slide?
Okay.
Thank you very much. So I'll blast through this bit because it's so super exciting. But basically, the underpinning pedagogy behind what we decided to set up, there's a model called the Conversational Framework by Diana Lorilla for a few years. She came up with this classification of different activity types. And there are 6 different activity types that she refers to, and these are also used, or they're recommended currently by DCQE in their ABC framework, which is something that's currently being, I think, going to be rolled out in the DCQE online courses that support people with the pedagogy for teaching block 1. And also our institutional partner, online program manager, CEG Digital, use a similar model, which is also based on these 6 sort of learning types. And I've mentioned some of them briefly already, but primarily there's acquisition, inquiry, practice, production, discussion, and collaboration. So Charlotte, would you mind popping onto the next slide? I won't go into too much detail because it gets a bit heavy, but basically we wanted to make sure there was a blend of these different activity types on the course. And primarily, as I said, the online stuff was designed to be learning by acquisition. So that's where you can get away with saying, all right, chaps, here's the video, watch this, do the reading, that's great. And then you come to the face-to-face session and we'll do the collaboration, the discussion. As we found throughout the year, it changed, and it wasn't always possible to rely on the fact that you'd be able to do the more social constructivist thing face to face. I had to find ways of trying to include those other activities online as well. So there's an indication here on screen of some of the types of activities that we're planning to do online. Some of them are quite straightforward. It's not really rocket science, readings, resources, podcasts. But other ones where you're trying to get that collaboration, it could be a bit more tricky. So that was part of the process for us of establishing how to do that. All right, thanks, Charlotte. Do you want to pop on the next one? Right here, thanks very much. And this slide...
Is everybody on mute? Just because there is a little bit of feedback coming through. So if everybody wouldn't mind just checking their mics and making sure they are muted, that would be great. Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks, Charlotte. Yeah, and this slide, just briefly, it looks quite intense. Whenever we on WebEx, it's always a bit full on because there's a lot of detail there. But what we found was, as we started to produce this course, it's effectively designed as a year-long undergraduate module and ultimately postgraduate module as well. And so it's pretty massive, and the quantity of stuff in it, Charlotte and I found pretty early on that we needed to map this out quite clearly. So we've used a fairly hefty, basically a big spreadsheet for the content that we produced, haven't we? And what we found that we needed to be able to use documents that would be useful for design purposes, but also for communication to share with stakeholders and other people involved. So what we settled on was doing a sort of a brief summary illustration like this. So this is kind of like a rough mapping of the entire course, chronologically from left to right. And you can't see too much in detail, but what we've done is we've coded it so there's the online activities and the face-to-face activities as grey and green. And those are each mapped to those 6 activity types to show how the blend of activities works. And we've also linked them to the learning outcomes and tried to show how the assessments as you go through the course. So what I guess what we're trying to say ultimately is, because it looks quite dull and quite heavy from a distance, but actually it's really important to map this out. And we found it was particularly important because as the project spirals, as any kind of online project like this spirals, you add more and more content, you start to lose track of where things are and what. It's really useful to be able to see it visually. And as I said, to use that as both a design tool, but also as a communication tool. And if anything else, Charlotte, you want to add on that one?
I think also, I suppose, just from the point of view of the learner, this storyboard has been so helpful because, as we all know, when you're in the classroom, you can see the whites of their eyes and you can think about whether or not you're losing them, whether that person has got no idea what you're talking about. And so I think actually having it mapped out like this, of course, you still can't get that sort of interaction, but at least you can keep going back to the journey and keep thinking about, have I already asked them to do something like this? Have they just watched a video shortly before? So I think it kept us on track in that respect. And I would also say it helped with the authenticity of the assessment that Aaron's mentioned. So we were very keen that this had to be not jumping through artificial hoops as far as the students were concerned. This had to feel that it had real world value. And that was important in terms of the voices that were coming through the video. So we had through the platform. So we wanted to make sure we had a variety of sort of expert speakers in there and that they were reinforcing some of the messages around, you know, albeit implicitly, but why we were giving them the assessment that we were. Maybe there'd be a nod to that in some of the expert speakers sections, and that the students had to see the value in preparing this, that not only was it for the assessment, but they were actually going to use that either to prepare for or to engage in the live recruitment processes that they were going through. And this helped us to make sure there was nothing superfluous in that assessment.
Well, thanks, Charlotte. Do you want to do the next one?
Yeah, so and then just as we felt we were really getting into our stride and making some headway, we were sort of starting the content creation. We were going out to businesses, recording videos with them, starting to line up placement assistants to do some of the content for us. And then, of course, COVID hit. And this posed lots of unexpected challenges and really slowed us down. But we're not here for a sympathy vote because we've all been through it. We thought that this actually worked to highlight, yes, some of the challenges, but also to emphasise that importance of having the clear storyboard, which we really came back to in that period of lockdown. And as the module kept swinging back and forth, as we thought we would be on campus in September, we wouldn't be, and so on. So I suppose the practical issues were capturing new video content just became horrendous because we couldn't now go out to the businesses to do the filming, but equally the employers, the alumni who had promised to do the recording themselves, and we'd got some really lovely professional results, but the ones that we were still waiting for, of course, instead of being in their lovely reception hall with a great banner behind them, they were basically in their spare bedroom at home, and it just wasn't going to have the same professional or authentic look that we were hoping for. And also the video editing, instead of being in the studio together or the video editing suite together, that just became a bit of a challenge as well. So we had to find new ways of editing our existing video. Part of the rationale of this also was that we would have a dedicated member of staff who would deliver this content for us. But because of the recruitment freeze, we lost that post. And so that posed other unexpected challenges. But I think really it was fundamentally the design changes, the design challenges that were the biggest hurdles for us to cross over. And I've highlighted them here. But I think if we just look at how the module changed in terms of the original pilot to the current pilot, that really illustrates these challenges down here more powerfully. So when we started, our pilot was going to be 2 postgraduate courses would be taking this module, and they would be taking it as an online program, and there would be workshops embedded in the module for them, and there would also be some one-to-one tutorials, and they were going to be front-loaded in Teaching Block 1 because our postgrad students were applying for placements right from essentially September, October when they joined that postgrad course. And then we had about 250 undergrad programs in the undergrad students in the pilot. We had one course that was taking it embedded within an existing level 4 skills module. So they'd work through the online platform and have our workshops facilitated by our new member of staff, but they would be embedded in an existing module. And then our other undergrad students would have our kind of bespoke PYPJ module that would run all year with an online program and the workshops spread throughout. What we ended up with was the revised pilot, and the revised pilot came really because as we were sitting there in April, May time, we were suddenly thinking, these students, these first year students in particular, will be joining us. They'll have had potentially 6 months out of full-time education. They're facing a university experience that wasn't what they were planning for. At that point, we didn't know that we'd have any face-to-face at all. So we were concerned they'd be trying to get to grips with online learning, all of their technical knowledge. And if there was going to be any module which they could consider to be a sort of nice to have or one to lose sight of, this was going to be it. And it just didn't feel the right time to be piloting it with them. So at that point, we decided to reduce the undergrad programme down really to the international business students, because we hoped that we'd at least have some face-to-face to we already had that existing module that we could hook into. But what also happened, which has actually been a really nice variation of the pilot for us, we think, is that one set of courses, the accounting and finance courses, they're going to adopt the online programme within their really well-structured personal tutoring programme, and we're going to provide some complementary workshops for them to embed in that programme. And so that they don't miss out, all of the other level 4 students will have access to the module, to the platform, but they will have to engage in sort of self-directed learning through it, but at least they get access to that platform. And then we've reduced down the level 7 delivery to just one course. Again, this was because when we thought we were having face-to-face, we thought at least in teaching block 1, those students could be guided through the online programme, and that then we could offer one-to-one tutorials in teaching block 1 with more of a sort of coaching, I suppose, approach to them. Going. Of course, now we have been able to bring some workshops in as well within the 6-hour cap. And we've switched with our recruitment freeze, we've switched to a dedicated member of the placement office team who will be able to step in for the delivery for the pilot scheme. And that's why, again, it had to be that much smaller. So those are the changes really that we felt. And of course, all of these changes meant we're now having to create 4 different variations of the platform, slightly different workshops for each. And so the shape has changed quite a lot back and forth.
Smashing, thanks, Charlotte. Yeah, sorry, if anyone's got their microphones on still, and you'd be prepared to mute, that'd be fantastic, just to keep the audio levels clear. Thanks. Okay. So as Charlotte said, what we've had to do is ended up stratifying the project quite a bit and creating different iterations of the course, and we'll talk about that in a second. But just firstly, we wanted to give you a couple of examples of what it looks like. I think we talked about this quite a lot during the production process, Charlotte and I, and actually when you talk about an online course, everybody's got a different view of it. And I think on the one hand, you might think an online course could be, a Word document or a PDF online. On the other end of things, you might have done a Coursera course that looked fantastic and it had Hollywood level visuals and all sorts of stuff. So it can be quite hard to visualize that. But just to reassure you, what we're doing here, it's nothing particularly flashy. What we've got is a Moodle site for the module, and I think we're going to have one for each iteration of the module probably. And what we've done is we're going to try and use the new DCQE template baseline. But at the moment, we've got some standard visuals in there, and we've just categorized the site. And we're basically, as students work their way through, for each separate section, we've got a package in Articulate Rise, and it points the students off to that. They go and do the content. So as we said earlier, we really wanted to make sure that for the online stuff, we kept students on a clear pathway so they didn't have the opportunity really to get lost and didn't have the opportunity to disengage from the material, because we appreciate once you start adding extra resources, it can feel a bit like a messy drawer of content and people can get a bit confused about the purpose of it. So we've tried to keep a clear sort of minimalist flow as you go through. We've also had a fantastic student working with us who's done some of the visuals, which has been really helpful because Charlotte and I have year 8 art skills. Well, Charlotte's very good, but I'm not very good. So that's been really useful. And we wanted to keep the same branding feel for our Faculty's Career Ready programme as well, to make sure that students saw it all kind of links together with all the other employment and I've forgotten what the other E stands for suddenly.
Enterprise.
Enterprise, well done. Yeah, so it fits in with all the other activities we're doing. Brilliant, thanks, Charlotte. So that's the Moodle site. And then the next slide, if you're okay, Charlotte, just to pop up that one on. The actual packages themselves in Rise. So there've been some questions about this, and we'll happily explain a bit about what Rise is. So we opted for this particular platform, and what we found, I think one of our key tips would be that when you go through and start planning what you want from an online course, you'll find there's lots of different platforms, and each one will probably do one thing that you want, or several things. So one might be a great online portfolio, another one will be really good at showing videos in a really smooth scrolling way. And what you find is that there isn't one package that does everything. So you end up sort of cobbling things together quite often. And what we have found is that we've opted for Articulate Rise for a number of reasons, but everything is a compromise, really. And so Rise is a very straightforward, easy to use, basically drag and drop authoring solution for creating online courses. And as you can see here, we've got, this is just some basic screenshots, but we've got videos, got readings, podcasts. We've created some little icons so you can see what kind of activity you're doing, whatever that is. And we've tried to include that. So it's all basically a linear flow through this content. And then there's a little menu on the left and you can choose which bit to go to if you want to jump ahead or back. But the challenge is that you kind of get what you get. So if you've done one Articulate Rise course, and this is some of the questions that are coming up in the chat, so if you've done one, you've pretty much done all of them, really. They all look fairly similar. They're all smooth scrolling through this content. And it's up to you to add the content within that to make it look engaging. You can do things in it like knowledge checking, quizzes, and little elements of interactivity, and you get other things within it. But ultimately, it's a useful package, but it does have some limitations, and there is a sort of a wall you can't get past with it. So we explored other options, but we found we wanted to stick with one thing. So that's the reason why we went with Rise. Charlotte, do you want to add anything else to that, or is that okay?
No, I think that's perfect.
Brilliant. Okay, so I'll hand over to you now for the sort of the main takeaway bits.
We've just got two more slides, and then we're happy, as I say, to take questions and also talk about some of the more technical elements of the bill. But so what have we learned? I would say don't underestimate the time involved, especially in the planning and the storyboarding, and definitely make that your priority. I would also say it took a lot longer than we thought to do the filming, so think really carefully about how much kind of newly created video you want in there. But actually the storyboarding was what kept us on track. So when we were pivoting back and forth because we weren't sure how the face-to-face was going to go, the storyboard really saved us because we could map through the changes. I'd say also manage everybody's expectations, because it feels it's very lovely when everybody gets behind your idea. And it was lovely when it extended from being a level 4 only project to a level 7. But actually, obviously, you're still working on the same time frame and the same budget. But I think also manage expectations in terms of what the technology can actually do, and Aaron's touched on that. I think the technology will only go so far, especially if, like us, you're doing this on a shoestring budget. And I think other people can have this expectation of what you're going to do for them. And then when they see what you've done, it can sometimes feel a little bit underwhelming for them and for you. And that's a bit of a challenge. So I think be prepared to say no, actually, about what you can and can't do. And also definitely manage expectations about what the final product will be. And that's why the blended was so important to us, that actually we could have them going through an online platform that looked professional and was functional and got them to cover the essential material, but the module would really come alive and be narrated, if you like, through the face-to-face touch points. Yeah, filming and editing took a long time. I said that already. I think also they think about the third-party content that's already out there. We have used, sort of some of that, as long as you've got consent and approval and whatever else. And actually your job is often just to curate the journey, not necessarily to have to create all of these additional new resources. On that note, we did delegate. We did have quite a wide team of people who were contributing to this, and I think the product is enhanced as a result. So try not to be too controlling about doing it all yourself. We had a very small, trusted project team who were leading, but we had quite a big team of contributors. Yes, that took an extra time, I suppose, to manage all of that, but I think it was worth it. And I think something that I found challenging, but that might just be me, was the decision making. I think trusting your judgment when you're doing something new. You're the author, it's your product, and I think you have to just make a call and move on. There can be quite a lot of dithering at the beginning, especially when you're thinking about the shape of that storyboard, when you've got a blank sheet of paper in front of you. And I think you do ultimately just need to nail your colours to the mast, and you go for it. Any other things, learning points from your point of view? Aaron, should have asked that, sorry.
No, that's all right. I think possibly as we pivoted backwards and forwards, what we found, was that we ended up seeing as well what the real value of the course was, and the fact that we were really hoping that the face-to-face interactions, engagement with placements officers, business advisors, and careers and employability staff, that would be the thing that cements things. And I think what we found when we did our initial scoping, we went to Southampton, didn't we? And we found that they were doing something kind of similar to us, and their module wasn't credit bearing either. But they'd managed to engineer it so that the students had bought into it because they saw it as being a core part of their course, and they saw the academics, the support staff giving them the teaching input, and they saw, these are my teachers, this is what I do, I go to this session, I engage with this, this activity, and it managed to make it work. And I think that was something that really impressed us, because often we found that it's very hard to get skills-based stuff taken really seriously as part of courses, unless it's picked up by course leaders and embedded in a particularly proactive way. So yeah, I think as with the pivot, we found just reassured us that it was the face-to-face that was really, really valuable, and the online stuff was there to support that and work around it as much as possible.
Yeah, important. That's a really important point, Aaron, and also the buy-in from the course leaders and the course team as well, so that we appeared to be just an extension of that team as far as the students were concerned. Yeah, I agree. And lastly, the last slide then, we were just thinking about how, if we can bear another project, how we might kind of take this forward. And actually, I'm a law teacher, sort of a law lecturer in my other half of my life, and we will often teach non-law students a bit of law within their course. And actually, it struck me that whilst we're usually there to teach contract law or tort law or property law, actually, we always have to give the students a little bit of the structure of the English legal system and the development of the law, for context and for their general knowledge. But that's often not assessed. And it often takes away from the time that we spend on the more substantive subjects. So something like a package in Articulate Rise would be really fantastic to give them that sort of burst content, pre-entry content, if you like, before they start the substantive module, and you could just have one workshop to kind of bring it all together. But we also thought maybe teaching some skills, maybe academic skills or soft skills, maybe teaching professional ethics or interviewing skills for some of our students who are working in clinic environments, sort of student-led advice clinics. We've often talked about supporting transition into placement and making the students more business ready, so building commercial confidence, but also building their confidence around writing professional reports, making an agenda for a meeting, taking notes of that meeting, sort of presentations in a business environment. And actually, again, you could see some sort of Articulate Rise package, maybe supported with a couple of workshops, would be much less resource intensive than running a series of workshops. And actually, the students could dip in and out of that at their own pace and come back to it while they were out on placement. So those are just some of our ideas, and we'd really like to hear your thoughts around if you could see some transferability to your context, if you're already doing some things like this that you'd like to share, and also to take any other questions and discussion points from the session. So Aaron, do you want to...
Thanks, Charlotte. Yeah, thank you so much, guys, for your questions and comments so far. I've had some lovely comments from Rich as well, and he's mentioned a really good point, which is the issue of time, really. And I think this is something that Charlotte and I are very aware of. What we're giving a case study of something that took a year to do, and we appreciate that's not a luxury that's now available. And I think that's a real challenge, isn't it, Charlotte? That designing online courses historically has always been something that people have said, this takes quite a few years. We've got to do, got to really do this properly. And now we're in a position where you've got to do it pretty quick. But what we really wanted to say was, this is a bit like a grab bag. If there's bits you can take from this that are useful, so if it's a choice of a platform or the use of some online platform for learning by acquisition, so you can supplement your 6 hours face to face or whatever doing something else, then that's the ideal, really, isn't it? Have you got anything to sort of add to that, Charlotte?
I think I'd also say, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think the actual act of getting it up onto Articulate Rise, once you've got to grips with the technology, isn't particularly onerous or time consuming. So I think actually it's about saying, set out some manageable parameters. And for us, this project just grew and grew. And that was, we didn't keep control of it. And we ended up really where we wanted to be, but just a bit quicker. So we were prepared to go with it. But I think set manageable parameters. Don't spend too much time creating new video. Think very carefully about the storyboard, and then actually the act of getting it in the package is fairly swift, I would say, and manageable. Aaron, would you say?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward to use, and that in terms of some of the questions about Articulate Rise. So I apologise. Frustratingly, Rise isn't something that's available on apps anywhere. So it's something that, in fact, Anchor is in the room today. So our TSU manager, we had a team license for this. So it costs a few £100s a year for a license for an individual. So in that regard, it's not super cheap. But what it gives you is a really rapid authoring thing. So you just plop the content on there and then you arrange it as you want. But there are alternatives available, and I would say it doesn't do anything that Moodle doesn't do, or that you can't do with H5P, for example, which is part of Moodle now as well, or as a tool that you can use in there. So we would say the platform itself, while this looks quite snazzy at first glance, it isn't the be-all and end-all, and it doesn't offer something that can't be done in other ways, or that your faculty OCDs can't assist with. But I would agree with Charlotte that it's yeah, very much about the planning process, I think. And we came across various other platforms, didn't we? We looked at PebblePad, which offered an e-portfolio solution. And I've seen that being used in other institutions for induction. So Rich mentioned there as well, that could be something to be used in induction. People have used PebblePad to create like an induction workbook. And then you basically like Articulate Rise, you've got to look at these videos, go through your content as you become inducted on the course, and then you take that to your personal tutor and they sign it off and that kind of thing. So those are the kind of ways you could use that. And we're using Google Sites, aren't we, Charlotte, as a portfolio tool within the course to try and make sure that students can create content and then share that with the placements advisors and get feedback on that. Yeah, anything else, Charlotte, on that?
No, I have seen PebblePad used elsewhere for career management courses as well, so I think that would work. No other comment.
We appreciate it's problematic because everything like this kind of ends up costing money, and we found ourselves quite paralysed to start with. Well, what can we do for free, or from what we've got, really? And this was kind of the option because it was the thing we had available to us. And there are there's a possibility within the university that it's worth considering if other people are interested in this. I know Becky's mentioned as well that she's used it, and it gets used across the university for different things. There's a more fully functional version of it as well, where you can develop big packages that can sit on Moodle. That takes a bit more time and effort, but yeah, Rise is quite useful if you want to do something quick, basically.
Do you think the limitations were? Because I can see one of the questions here was around the kind of the limitations of Articulate Rise.
Thanks, Charlotte. Yeah, basically all courses do look pretty much the same. So if you go online and search for Articulate Rise courses, they all look pretty snazzy, but they all look like this. And once you've done a few of them, I think you can get to the point where you think, oh, it's another one of those multiple choice questions. It's scrolling up at me. That looks nice. So there is that element of it. I think an individual license is about £450 a year in the end. So that is a massive limitation. The positives of it are that you can share it with other people, you can embed it in Moodle, and you can get the marks out of it. So if you do a quiz in it, then you can feed that into your Moodle gradebook and see what you got, just like you would do with a quiz or something else in Moodle. But yeah, it's basically a Fisher-Price My First Online Course Maker, I'd say, but it looks quite nice. That's probably the best way of describing it. That's me being a bit reductive, sorry.
There's a question here from Rich on the PYPJ demo is quite image rich. Was it led by the Carpe Diem style? And also, do you have opinions or student feedback on how useful the images are for engagement, aspiration and motivation? That's a really good question, Rich. And the answer is no and no, to be honest. You're talking show reel, I think, aren't you? The honest truth is that show reel was just put together for this really swiftly, and Aaron is available at a very reasonable daily rate for voiceovers or podcasts, just to let everybody know. We just did it really swiftly for this to just sort of give an overview.
And the question wasn't about the show reel, it was about the site that you linked to. Because I went off and had a look at the site while you were talking as well, and it's really good and looks really pretty. And every day's learning activity has got a big picture in it as well. I was wondering how critical is that for anchoring? Is this something that I don't know about? Because we tend not to put pictures in. And is this something that you do by default, or is it just something that happened with Rise, so you kept doing it? Is there a background? Is there a pedagogical reason for having that stock content in there?
Great question. Well done. Nice mandolin, by the way, as well. Yeah, it's because of the nature of Rise. I think it's largely designed as a training package kind of platform. So it's often used for quality and diversity training or induction training for a company. And so it comes with all these stock images. And the show reel we used there, we ended up using some stock images. And part of the reason, to be honest with you, was pragmatism, because we entered lockdown and we didn't have all the content we wanted created. I don't know if Charlotte might be on the edge of a seat as I say this, but yeah, so we ended up having to use some of the content we had and augment it with other things. So yeah, I mean, I guess pedagogically speaking, the choice of images was largely for maintaining visual engagement and the idea of if there was an image that backed up what you were saying, hopefully that's positive, but it's arguable as to whether all those images always back up the point. And so some can be distracting. So it's a really good point, Rich. And I would say that's always worth considering. Like, why are we putting an image in if we're going to, why not just have flat text or something else? And something we did get as feedback from on students in a panel. Do you remember this, Charlotte? We asked a student about, would you engage with videos and this kind of stuff? And a lot of them said, oh, we don't care about videos. We're not going to watch the videos, even if they're 1 minute long or 30 seconds long, because we're just not interested unless it's credit bearing. I'm not going to do it, basically. So it was part of this challenge almost of us. We wanted to throw the kitchen sink in at some stages to try and make it as engaging and interesting as possible, but in the knowledge that ultimately could be quite a negative thing. It could be a turn off. So yeah, that's a really good question.
And I think on the feedback point, well. This is, bear in mind, this is a pilot. So actually we've had a lot of co-creators involved, but we haven't really had the feedback yet on the prototype. Truthfully, we're still finishing it off for October, but next year we'll run as a pilot. And actually I'm welcoming the smaller pilot now, because it means we can do lots more touch points in terms of feedback with the students. And then hopefully we can roll out something maybe slightly different, or just build on that for the following year. So we'll let you know what feedback we get on that, actually, Rich, if you're interested.
Yeah, I had a follow-on question. I think it segues quite nicely with what Glenn's just asked as well, which is that you kind of mentioned the speed of Articulate Rise and how nice it feels to scroll through and have it feeling slick. And one of the complaints that we often have from students and other staff is that Moodle is slow. So this is where it goes into Glenn's question. Why did you end up not just going with Moodle? Why Articulate Rise? Was it the slowness, or was it something else? What caused you to stray from the fold?
Brilliant question. I'll give my response, and then Charlotte can give hers. So yeah, basically, as Glenn said, curious because why pay the money? We had the license already, and we've been using it for a couple of other projects. So part of the reason was, thought, oh, this worked okay for those projects, so we'll give this a go and mock it up and see how you do. So often what we found is I've used Rise to create a prototype for something and show someone, and then they go, oh, I really like that, so we'll go with that approach. So as much as anything, it's convenience for a prototyping tool almost leads people to then go, oh, actually, we'll stick with that because that looks quite nice. It's a really good question. Fundamentally, what it offers over Moodle is simply that smooth scrolling thing. I think there's nothing in it that you can't position in Moodle. I guess it's slightly more minimalist, and you don't have some of the frames around the edge. So it feels like just focusing on the progression through the course material, whereas Moodle does have, because of all the jobs it does, it's got lots of other stuff to do. And sometimes that, I think that can lead students to feel, as you say, that sense of it being a bit hard to navigate through. But I think realistically, we know that it's very powerful and you can do a lot of things with it. Charlotte, did you have anything else to add on why we used it?
I suppose I think it was slicker. I think my Moodle can be really clunky. I think I also wanted the students to feel they were going off somewhere to do some work, so that they were actually being taken off somewhere different from Moodle. And I think also I quite liked it because it isn't like LinkedIn Learning, but it has that sense of being somewhere else, being in a sort of slightly different environment, and yeah, a little bit more like a tutorial, I suppose, online tutorial feel for me. But I'm not a technical person, that's why I have to be with Aaron at all times.
I'm just making it up, so we're fine. But does that give a bit of an insight, Rich? Is there anything else? If you think that's weird, why did you do that? Then feel free to say it, and we'll happily elaborate.
That's fascinating. The idea that our online learning environment, you want to get a break from it and go somewhere else to do some learning and compartmentalize it. That's an interesting piece of mindset, because I personally don't use Moodle at all, because I find it too slow and it encumbers me too much when I need to create content quickly. And this is my big concern, is as you picked up on the question or the point I made before, is time over the next few months. It's going to be very, very short. So it's been a fascinating presentation today. Thank you.
No, thanks, Rich. That's a really good point. The speed thing is a challenge. And what I would say as well is there's that challenge of novelty as well. Like when you see something for the first time, you think, yeah, this is great. I want this. I'm going to use this. And so we've done that with Rise a bit. And what's going to happen, I think, is we're going to get to a critical point where the novelty is kind of, yeah, I've seen these courses before. Yeah, and they all look pretty similar. They're all minimalist or whatever. And then something else will come along to overtake that. And that's the challenge. And I think, as you've rightly said, Rich, Moodle can be quite hard to produce content for quickly. Unless it's something you're doing it all day and you're unless you know all these workarounds. And I think that is quite challenging often for lecturers and academics. And I find it just takes a long time to produce the content quickly. So there is a bit of a challenge there. And it is weird that we're almost directing people away from the platform for the purpose of that. It's almost because the market has led students and people into seeing LinkedIn Learning and Coursera as online courses that are very slick. And so Rise offers something that emulates that almost. And so that's possibly anyway, sorry, I could talk about this all day, so I won't, I'll stop. But just to address Becky's comment, do we use SCORM packages to or embed the link in Moodle for Rise? So Becky, good question. Yeah, we're going to embed them as SCORM packages so that then we can get the indicative feedback, the information from the analytics for it back into Moodle so we can report on quiz results and that kind of thing. At this stage, we're just using links, I think, because it's the prototype, but we will put them in as SCORM packages if anyone else is interested. Thanks.
Brilliant. Are there any other questions or observations?
The other observation that we haven't talked about, but we did type about, Aaron Tuck, while you were talking, was about the storyboard, because that's a really brilliant overview. I love that. And I haven't done that for my courses, but I really want to do that now. Is that the fact that kept you on track was really interesting. So my question is, how long did it take to do the storyboard and to maintain it?
That's quite a fun to answer, isn't it? Because we weren't really.
Yeah, well, we basically made a big Excel spreadsheet, Rich, where we added each item that we were going to put in the pathway, and that, as it built, that got us to see where we were, and then we summarised that into a little storyboard, as the one we showed on the screen. And that's a really good question. Thanks.
Because we started with two sort of 2-3 hour brainstorming sessions, didn't we? Split apart, one before the visit to Southampton, one after. And then it was from there that we then met again and started to sort of see that broad structure around discovering, exploring, embarking. And then came the spreadsheet.
Yeah, and I would say that it was particularly useful. It built sort of as you went through. If you go on Gilly Salmon's website, I'll put the link in the chat. There's the full work through of how you can do the Carpe Diem process in your own home at your own convenience, if you like, and it gives ideas of how you can do the storyboarding process in sessions. And it basically is sort of post-it notes and paper, and then you summarize it. So the idea is you've just thought about how the assessments link to each week's activity or each part of its activity, and you can kind of visualize it overall. So yeah, I think I put in the chat that we just use Microsoft Word to do the illustration because we didn't want it to get too large and cumbersome, because it can, I guess, it then can become like a project kind of task in itself. I've seen other people use things like Trello, right, or other technologies where they try and map it out or use Microsoft Project. But yeah, our aim was try and use it as a communication tool as well as a design tool, as we said.
And also because there were so many different people working on different parts of it as well, it meant that we could just say, you just work on that bit of the storyboard and just export that for them. And we had different sections, didn't we? So within that sort of the outline of it, and then we had, this is the text that we want to go in, here's the link to the video, so that it was all really nicely set out, which helped with the build and helped make sure we were all working on the same page. I would definitely do that again if I had another project, definitely.
And I think so thanks to Jackie, she just added something in there as well. Because we've got different experts working on projects at the same time, people are producing different activities. And I think seeing it in the storyboard, you get to see the context overall. And so you can kind of then create an overall narrative, because obviously if Charlotte might say one thing and put some text in, I might write in a different way. And so you want to sort of harmonize that so it feels the same for students all the way through. So yeah, I guess in that sense, it was really useful rather than having all these disparate bits of paper everywhere with different ideas and trying to slam it together at the last minute. It's quite useful to try and build it as we went along.
That's brilliant.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your contributions and thank you for joining us. And we're really happy after this or at any point over the summer to, chat on Google Meet or maybe in person at some point, or just by email. So, keep in touch. And if you're interested in the feedback that we get next year as well, we're happy to share that as well. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks for your time, everyone. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.